Afternoon. A little bit. Have your lunch. The next 5 minutes, please grab your lunch. Grab a seat. Again, we're gonna try to start in. All right. If you could please find a seat so we can get started.
Alrighty, so the Olive Garden, the food is ready to be served, but just so everyone knows that it is all gluten-free pasta. The pasta is all free. And then there is marinades and meat sauce. Okay.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing 1. All right, guys, we have one more minute before we get started. Okay, let's grab your seats. If you have your food, let's please grab a seat. We're getting there. We're getting there. If you have your food, please take a seat. We're almost there, almost there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. We have about 70% already seated, making progress.
I'm afraid to ask Amy. I'm going to give her a day to let her just relax because she's not the best. I don't know if they just didn't arrive in time. We cleared it with the management company. They said they were fine. When we did some of the day, she was asking about it. But she went up early. Weather. Good afternoon, everybody. We're gonna go ahead and get started. We are going to get started. We are gonna get our guide. Please tone it down. People in the back, people in the back. We're gonna get started.
If I could get your attention, please. If I could get your attention, please. All right, guys, for the sake of time.
Can you hear me? Okay, for the sake of time, let's get started. For those who have not gotten your food, please continue. Grab your meal, but we just ask you to turn it down so we can get started. One of our panelists, he has to leave at 1:45, and so we need to get started. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Please continue in line, get your meal, but let's go ahead and get started.
Thank
So
you.
first of all, thank you everybody. Thank you everybody for being here. This is our first chapter meeting of the year. We're very, very excited to have you here. If you are a board of directors, could you please stand up or raise your hand if you're a board of directors this year at the 2020 Georgia CCIM chapter? Could you please give them a big round of applause? We have an exciting year. Today we had our first BOD meeting, and we have a lot of plans for the year. We have an outstanding team, so I'm very happy to have the team that we have this year. So thank you, everybody. Very quick, let's go ahead. We have a quick social media announcement. So I'm going to ask Brian to tell us a little bit about this. Is one of our big initiatives we're pushing together as a team about our social media. If you could please give us a couple of minutes to tell us what we're doing, please, Brian.
Yeah, so Brian Hughes with Simpson Company. I'm in charge of the technology chair this year. And so we really want to grow our social media presence. And we know most people are on their phones all the time, checking Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and whatnot. And so as far as growing the chapter membership, it's really important that you guys take out your phones. I'm sure Leo won't care to do it right now. Go find Georgia CCIM on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and start following us. We are going to be posting relevant articles, content, pictures from events, updates. And so while we'll still have all of our emails going out, you'll see a lot more activity on the social media platform. So anytime you post something, you sold something, you've been recognized for something, absolutely tag us to it, hashtag GACCIM, and help us to grow our presence there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. And again, as we've been talking among ourselves, it's more about to promote you guys as individuals. As you know, CCIM designation has a great reputation in the market, so we're going to keep pushing the designation to promote your business, to promote you guys. For those of you who already have the designation or pursuing the designation, these are our efforts to promote you guys. Not only the chapter, but you as individuals as well. Regarding our calendar, it's posted online. I'm not going to go about our meetings because of we're running, we have not a lot of time. So if you are interested in finding out about our next meetings, the next one is April the 2nd, but we have a lot of different programs planned. One of them is we're going to do a visit to Savannah. That is going to be in the fall. We're going to visit Savannah. It's a program that Andrew Joyner started about 3 years ago, and we're going to do it again. We're going to visit the Port Authority, so hopefully you can join us on that as well. With that said, let me introduce you very quick to Mr. Jeff. Jeff is a great friend of the chapter, a great friend of us. He's one of our sponsors, but let me tell you a little bit more about him. He brings more than 30 years of business and public accounting experience to his clients, the diverse industries serving their financial reporting, tax and general business advisory needs. In addition to this, Rob Services, his deepest areas of expertise include business capital formation and finance, the real estate sector, obviously, and the commercial and residential construction and development industries. Let's give him a big welcome.
Leo, thank you. We're going to have one mic to share amongst the panel. Once I do a quick introduction, I'm going to hand things over here. As Leo said, I am with a regional CPA firm here in Atlanta, Carr, Riggs, and Ingram. We are what's referred to as a super regional. We're the 19th largest firm in the nation. By regional, we cover the Sun Belt, eastern New Mexico, across the Gulf states, up into North Carolina, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And my practice is a little more than 50% real estate related to, as I say, some flavor or type. Our panel members here, them in just a minute. We met Tuesday to kind of plan out this conversation here today, and that's where I came up with the title, Disputes, Assessments, and Incentives. Alan Ferguson is going to take the first part of the presentation today. He is with Invest Atlanta, and for those of you like me who have been in Atlanta for a long time, you might recognize the Atlanta Development Authority. Well, it's Atlanta Development Authority doing business as Invest Atlanta, I learned yesterday. He's going to cover more the incentive side, both specific to Invest Atlanta, but other organizations and governmental bodies they quite often work with here in Metro Atlanta as well. He is Vice President, Senior Vice President, Community Development with Invest. The other side of the equation, following Alan, Paul Miller, his firm that he's with, Marvin F. Poor, I mispronounced it earlier, Poor, but it's Poor and Company. They're a national property tax consulting firm dealing both with personal property and also real property. Specialty is in the property area. I'm going to let each of them, as they do their presentations, give you a little bit of background about the companies and themselves, and then they'll launch into their conversation. And I think, Alan, as we talked Tuesday, there are some areas of overlap where the folks you're working with, once the programs are launched, it's not unusual for somebody like Paul or a company like his to then work with those same folks in the implementation side. So if you guys could sort of double up on that, if you would. Here you go.
All right, good afternoon. People raising hands. How many of you, by growing a strong economy, building vibrant communities, and increasing economic prosperity for all Atlantans, all right? So that's a big, kind of broad, lofty mission. But here's what we actually do on a, tactical, day-to-day type of basis. We're concerned and we're focused on the economic growth and development of our city, from top to bottom, from the resident level, from the communities, from the neighborhoods, all the way through our corporate partners, attracting businesses, helping businesses that are located in Atlanta grow. For those businesses that are growing in Atlanta, we want them to stay and remain in Atlanta, because it's all a part of this full circle, if you will, this full network of ensuring economic prosperity, not just for the city of Atlanta, but also the impacts throughout the region. And so we do that through a variety of different activities. We have several economic development programs where we provide a number of different services, if you will, and especially for this particular group that is involved in commercial real estate from one aspect to another, various forms of real estate development in the city. We can be a very beneficial partner in terms of the work that you do and the clients that you serve. So we provide a number of different services that can assist everything from providing site selection assistance to providing economic incentives, and I'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to property tax incentives as well. But economic incentives to help you, attract those businesses, to your space, for those businesses that are looking at growing and have additional needs and they're adding employees. We work with them to help facilitate that by providing some incentives, as well as those, current, tenants and customers that you have that are possibly looking at relocating out of the city. We can work with you to try to see if we can come up with a program, some type of incentive package to help them stay, within the city, because that's one of the things that is imperative to what we do, which is trying to create, retain, and preserve jobs within the city of Atlanta. And going forward, to kind of give you a preview of what you'll see in the coming months, you're going to find us to be much more defined and much more focused around trying to create living wage and middle wage jobs here in the city. So, keep your eyes out for some happenings probably over the next 60 to 90 days where you'll see us really come out with some announcements we're going to come out with some different tools and resources to really focus on those areas. But in terms of my purview and what I'm directly responsible for, I run our community development division. And in that division, essentially, I'm responsible, and my team's responsible for really bringing all of those types of services and amenities and really resources, to our neighborhoods and to our communities to make Atlanta a great place to live. And part of making Atlanta a great place to live is making Atlanta affordable as well. So we want to make sure that we're creating, a sufficient amount of affordable housing, of workforce housing, and quite frankly, market rate housing, to serve all of of our population's needs. So when we look at ourselves in the housing space, we look at ourselves as really kind of serving the full spectrum, trying to enable housing development throughout the city, no matter whether you want to own or rent or what your income level is. We want you to try to find a home, try to find a quality place to live in the city. But we're also, very heavily involved in what we describe as placemaking activities. And, part of that is driven by, tools and incentives that we provide, from the property tax perspective. One of them, we're actually sitting in one of them right now, which is the Atlantic Station Tax Allocation District. Over several years, maybe 20-some odd years ago, the city of Atlanta grew and drive development in those particular areas because they were previously identified as lacking investment. And so I think everybody knows the history and story of Atlantic Station. This was, a defunct, decaying, old steel mill, before, Jacoby and having great vision, came together, brought together a mix of resources and tools, and launched this development called Atlantic Station. Well, the great thing about the TADs is that they drive investment, but what's even the better thing about tax allocation districts is they can get to a certain point where they really fulfill the mission of the development plan, and that's what we're seeing today, here in Atlantic Station. So this is one of the areas that's still designated as a TAD, but we're really not at a position where we have to provide incentives for businesses, for people, for companies to locate here because of what's been developed and the momentum that's occurred. So that's just the most successful example of the TAD implementation. But there are 9 other tax allocation districts throughout the city, and not all of them are created equal per se. There have been various levels of activities around them, but another one that you're probably most familiar with is the Beltline tax allocation district. The Beltline, and I don't know if a lot of people are in Atlanta and remember long enough back when the Beltline was first envisioned, and people were saying like, what is this? What is this thing? Is this thing really going to work? What's going to happen to it? So on and so forth. This whole notion of linking trails and parks around the city. It was like, it sounds nice, but what is it really? What's really going to happen from that? Well, we know just from the build out of the segment of the East Side Rail alone, that's generated somewhere close, I think, to $1.7 billion in real estate development investment. And if you look at the spillover economic ancillary benefits to that, that was a tremendous that was an investment. The initial segment that the city purchased cost roughly about $44 million, to purchase that land and that right of way. And so if you look at the multiple on that that entry level basis, which at that particular point in time, the Shirley Franklin administration, people were like, the city's paying $44 million for old railroad. That's crazy. What an outrageous use of funds. Now it was like just a fantastically smart investment because of everything that's occurred. So, with that having been said, we offer a variety of different types of tools and incentives that we have. The tax allocation districts are just one, and like I said, they vary by needs and support that's provided to them. But we can provide grants towards development. We can provide what we call a pay-as-you-go, which is essentially a tax incentive that's a property tax reduction that can go over an extended period of time as well. And we also create programs, specifically designed programs within each tax allocation district to spur economic and development activity. And so one of the things that may be of interest to you is that we have a small business facade program, that we've launched where, if you have clients, if you have tenants, if they're located in a business in a particular tab, they can apply for grant funding, essentially to dress up the outside and do some limited interior renovations, of their properties, because we want all of our businesses to be open and appealing, to customers so they can continue to thrive. Based on that experience, we're working on a small neighborhood strip center type of product as well, where we can, Atlanta is, kind of known for these small neighborhood strip centers. Some of them kept in better condition than others. And so what we're trying to do is to create a program so we can take those small strip centers and provide some facade improvements, making them more appealing. And again, allowing those businesses that are located there an opportunity to thrive. And then another program I'm hoping to launch at the end of this year, using some tax proceeds, is, we're having a very, our local and native businesses are having a very difficult time staying in the city, given, the rising, costs, the rising rents. And so one of the programs that we're trying to create in some designated areas, we're going to try to launch it as a pilot, is what we call a commercial down payment assistance program. So you may have heard of down payment assistance programs that are geared towards home buyers. You provide them some incentive to assist with the down payment that makes the home more affordable, and then you create a home ownership position. Well, we're trying to look at launching a program called commercial down payment assistance aimed at small businesses and local native businesses that are currently renting their space, or maybe they're operating a business, within their home and they're looking to expand, trying to help those businesses afford, commercial space that they can own and buy and kind of withstand some of the pressures of demographic change, if you will, that, we're experiencing here in the city. So hopefully we'll have some news coming out the latter part of this year, third, fourth quarter of this year, with the launch of that program, which we're currently working on. And then last but not least, one of the tools that we offer is the lease purchase bond program, sometimes called the bond for title program. And it's been in the news, I know recently, both with, Fulton County and with the city in terms of, the program, whether it's needed, whether it's necessitated anymore. I can tell you from, our perspective, from Invest Atlanta perspective, we're reluctant to give up any tool that we have that we can use to, spur economic development and spur investment. And that tool has proven to be a very popular tool because it, as you guys may be familiar, it creates a property tax savings that accounts for, a reduction in city and county and school property taxes across the board that lasts for 10 years. It burns off over a 10-year period. It starts off at 50% property tax reduction, burning off by 5% each year until in your 11th year of ownership, that's when you're paying 100% of property taxes. And it's proven to be a very, very strong tool in terms of being able to allow, building owners and those who are doing new construction, providing new space, to be competitive with their rent offerings when they're out there and they're searching for tenants and they're trying to attract people to those spaces. They're able to pass through those savings and offer a more competitive lease rate to get those buildings filled up and occupied. And so, I'm sorry.
You all have questions?
Yeah, please. Feel free to answer.
As we go, do you have the ability in those programs to require some rent adjustments so that it's not pocketed just by the landlord, but there's some flow through to the tenants and the rate effects?
Residential project, the multifamily project. We provide these types of tools and incentives because we're looking for the public benefit. And so for a residential project, the public benefit that we're looking for is workforce housing. So there's either a 10% or a 15% set aside, 10% at 60% of median income, or 15% at 80% of median income for the units that you're going to provide on a multifamily project. And that's part of the public benefit that we're seeking there. If it's a commercial property, if you have a sense of the business and everything that you're trying to attract, a lot of times people approach us when they have a tenant in hand or they're about to enter into an agreement or a letter of intent with a potential tenant. We want to know who that tenant is. We want to understand, you know, if they're going, you know, if this is just a, you know, intercity, you know, kind of relocation, or if it's a new tenant coming to the city, a new business coming to the city per se, because we want to, you know, be engaged in that discussion so we can figure out, you know, can we tie them to, you know, programs that we offer through WorkSource Atlanta to try to get, you know, whatever future workers and pipeline, you know, employees that they're looking for. We can start develop that pipeline, get people trained to be able, you know, to apply for those jobs that they're creating. We have also been going back and forth with trying to create, you know, again, incentives for local businesses to participate, not local businesses to participate in the project as well. So for a commercial building where it's going to be primarily office, but there may be, you know, some retail opportunities there, making sure that we can connect, you know, local businesses and entrepreneurs to those retail opportunities. Again, as a part of public benefit, you know, making sure that there's some local representation there. And then really with everything that we do, we encourage you know, the developers and the general contractors to take advantage of, you know, WorkSource Atlanta as well as Westside Works, and there are a couple of other job training programs that provide training for construction workers, you know, construction and trades. And so we try to make those connections there as well, so that we can have, you know, Atlanta residents participating in the construction and development process. So thanks. Gracias.
You also use the phrase that we brought up to you, that public benefit.
Yeah.
My question at breakfast was, well, if you have two projects that look exactly alike, how do you decide? And that was the phrase that you used. Would you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, certainly. So, you know, we want to make sure at Invest Atlanta that when we're, you know, deploying these types of resources and providing these types of incentives, that we're really sticking, you know, to our mission. And, you know, you may have heard, you know, in the press or seen, you know, comments from parties out there around, you know, municipalities just giving incentives away, but not really asking or expecting anything from the incentives that we give. So our board actually has a different perspective on that. Our senior management, internal leadership has a different perspective on that, and we believe that our incentives should be tied to, you know, public benefit, you know, to some type of benefit that will, you know, directly support initiatives of the city, you know, our residents and our neighborhoods and our communities. So you may recall, you know, I guess it was last year, I'm a little bit shell-shocked from the experience, you know, the whole conversation around the Gulch and the development of the Gulch. So here, you know, here's the thing. You can't find a single person who doesn't believe that the Gulch needs to be developed. You know, it's something that, you know, has been pursued for, you know, almost 60 years, maybe over 60 years, and has never been able, you know, to get done and get fruition, come to fruition. But finally, you know, a developer came through, presented a proposal to develop it. And so our role in that whole conversation was really trying to say, okay, if we're going through all of these different exercises to put together, you know, a, you know, great incentive package for this developer to enable this development, you know, what are going to be the public benefits that the city, you know, derives from? So in and of itself, you know, there's economic, you know, development. Essentially, new usable real estate that can be taxed is being created within the city, and so, you know, the proceeds from those property taxes, you know, will benefit the city of Atlanta residents, you know, paying for services. But given the significance of the lift and the amount of resources available, we came to the table and said, you know, you've got to do other things. And so everything from, you know, engaging, you know, the training organizations, job training organizations to participate on the construction, to, you know, making sure that there's disadvantaged business representation on not only, you know, the development team, but providing, you know, professional services to the development as well, creating opportunities for development, you know, really putting in a mechanism for there to be, you know, a very strong, significant workforce housing component there, you know, at the Gulch as well, because we want to be a place where, you know, a broader spectrum of residents, you know, can enjoy, you know, the space that's being created. So that's just one example of us kind of coming together with a variety of different city agencies as well to bring public benefit to something that is a huge incentive. Lastly, but not least, I do want to touch on that, Invest Atlanta, we also serve as kind of a hub, if you will, a facilitator of really, engaging in conversation and building relationships with the other city agencies that you may have to engage with, or your tenants or clients may have to engage with. So from that standpoint, when you're working on a project and you need to talk to people in city planning, or you're looking for an incentive tool or some type of resource that's provided through the city or one of our sister agencies, we can facilitate those conversations with you as well, and your clients as well. And we've worked on several projects where we've kind of interceded, worked, and brought the parties together. I'm currently, negotiating on behalf of the city for a project we're not even involved in. Invest Atlanta's not even involved in, but they needed some help in terms of structuring a deal and a mechanism, and so we're advising on that to make sure the project works. And we do that all the time consistently. So if you're not looking for specific incentives, but you're just looking for help and support and assistance in furthering your development and facilitating these conversations, we're also the place that you can visit and come to and use us as a resource.
Almost like an incentive consultant.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so that's it. That's kind of what we do in a nutshell. I can bore you guys with like a 60-page, PowerPoint or whatever. And if you do want that, you can feel free to email me. I'm glad. It probably won't pass your filter or whatever, so I'll send you a link and you can download it. But what I really want to emphasize is that, if you're doing any type of business in the city, if you're doing any type of development in the city, the Invest Atlanta, the Atlanta Development Authority should be one of the first places that you want to stop to figure out, are there any tools, are there any resources, or is there any assistance that we can provide to help, move your projects and initiatives.
And all these homeless outside your door. Does Invest Atlanta, are they dealing with that at all, or is that just not part of your library? Is that somebody else dealing with that? And what to do with?
What we have done in 2017, we issued what we call our Homeless Opportunity Bond, where we provided $25 million that will go towards the capital costs of providing permanent supportive housing units. And that was matched, you may have heard this, that was matched through a capital campaign conducted through the United Way with roughly about $26 million that's been dedicated for services. And so out of that, the goal is to create initially 300, but expanding to 500 permanent supportive housing units throughout the city, where we can start to try to alleviate some of the challenges that we're having with the chronic homeless. Because it's one thing to actually build the units and everything. Really, the key part of it is making sure that you have the services in place, the wraparound services, to keep those households, keep those households, and keep those individuals stable. And so that's one of the things that we're currently in the process of working on. We consider the homeless population around resources we're trying to put towards homelessness.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Paul, we're going to turn it over to you. If you want to give us a brief description of your background and what your company does. But first, in your presentation, talk about how services you provided to your clientele when they were working with these sort of incentive programs. And then from there, you launch into I thought that'd be a good segue there.
Okay. I'm Paul Miller with Marvin Poor and Estates, and we pretty much do anything that's property tax related. I manage our Atlanta business unit, and out of that office we cover all of the Southeast with the exception of Florida. I've been in the business for 36 years, 27 years with Poor and 22 here in Atlanta. Also a founding member of the Georgia Association of Property Tax Professionals, and I'm a certified general appraiser in the state of Georgia. As far as Invest Atlanta and us, once those deals are done and that's turned over to the property tax assessor, even though there is still a 50% incentive to begin with, there's still opportunities or sometimes need to appeal those values. We handle that. Also, there's some specific procedures with development bond properties as far as when they come online to be assessed, and those burn down schedules. And a lot of times for our clients, we are the liaison between the developer, our owner, and the assessor's office in making sure that they apply those exemptions and abatements properly. Particularly with Fulton County, their staffing and the amount of these projects they're going through, a lot of times they don't have time to look at the individual specific properties and get it right every time, and we help them to do that.
So they might actually start assessing even on a reduced basis a year early?
Well, yeah.
Staged up, they might accelerate.
With a bonds for title deal, during the construction process, the improvements that are under construction shouldn't be assessed until the final certificate of occupancy, the year following the final CO. And a lot of times the assessors miss that. We have to go in and make sure that they apply it properly. And that affects the ramp-up schedule also. Excuse me. So that's pretty much the only real go-between between Alan and my presentation. But what I thought I would do, property taxes are one of the largest line item expense items on an operating statement for a commercial property. So what I thought I would do today is just give you a general overview of the assessment and appeals process, and then talk about an appeals court decision that came down last year that's relevant to property taxes. And as brokers, that would be relevant to your due diligence, I would think, or if you're managing properties in your budgeting, it could have an impact there. So I thought that's why I would. But the general process, properties are appraised at 100% of market value as of January 1st each year, and then the taxable assessment is 40% of that market value. Value notices typically issue between April 1st and July 1st every year, and those notices, they have to issue yearly regardless of whether or not there's a change in the value of the property. And that opens up your appeal process if that's something that's appropriate. Those notices have the prior year value, the proposed new value, the appeal deadline, and an estimate of taxes based on the prior year tax rates. And that should give you enough information to determine whether or not you want to investigate further and decide if you want to go down the road of appealing the assessments. The appeal deadline is 45 days from the date of the, that's on the next page. Sorry. That's me. Yeah. It's 45 days from the notice issue date. There are 3 appeal options, and you have to pick one of those at the time you file the appeal. That'd be the Board of Equalization, which is a 3-member panel that's chosen out of the grand jury pool. The hearing officer, which is a certified general appraiser in Georgia, or binding arbitration. The overwhelming majority of appeals are filed either to the Board of Equalization or to the hearing officers. Binding arbitration has been out there a long time, but it's very rarely used these days. Once an appeal is filed, the Board of Assessors can either increase or decrease, automatically forwarded to either the hearing officer. Binding arbitration is what is the date of the mailing of the decision. Before the appeal is actually set at the settlement conference, then the taxpayer has Superior Court of Appeals. Most of them are settled before they actually litigate. Every now and then you do have one that litigates. If the ultimate reduction from a Superior Court of Appeals is settled out before it litigates, the reasonable legal fees are 0. Now, that's really in a nutshell the process. But what I wanted to talk about that impacts budgets, and what I was talking about was OGA 485299C, which in our business we really just refer to it as 299C. And what 299C does is requires that a value that's resulting from an appeal is effective for that year and the following 2 years. There are some exceptions to that. If the taxpayer doesn't provide written documentation in the hearing of their value, if it's an appeal of a frozen value from a prior year appeal, or if there are material changes to the property, then those numbers can change. And there was the appeals court decision that came out down last year was relative to the material change to the property and 299C. DeKalb County in 2018 revalued a number of properties that were subject to the freeze, and their contention was that changes in market conditions constituted a material change which allowed them to lift the freeze. There were conflicting Board of Equalization decisions from several taxpayers that went to the Superior Court. There were 4 or 5 Superior Court decisions that came down on both sides of the issue. So ultimately, DeKalb County appealed it to the Appeals Court, and the Appeals Court said no, changes in market conditions are not specific to a property and therefore do not constitute a material change. Now, especially you guys that are buying and selling properties or representing owners and sellers, it should be noted that they have not stated directly whether or not a transfer or change of ownership could be considered a material change to the property. So that's still up in the air. And it's up in the air in the assessing jurisdictions. Cobb County and Gwinnett County, they have interpreted that very specifically in saying that the freeze still applies. This is a very recent decision, though, so Fulton and DeKalb, we really don't have any set indication from them on what they're going to say there. And why that matters, if you're looking at, especially with the market we have now, if you're looking at a property that's assessed at $20 million and it's selling for $40, that can have a pretty big impact as to what the timing is on the next reappraisal.
So if they've been through an appeal and gotten that 3-year lock,
Yeah.
by the middle, you still guarantee as the successive owner.
That's what's up in the air. Maybe not. Yeah, Cobb and Gwinnett are honoring that. Yeah. And that goes to my next to last? Effects of the transactions on assessments and property taxes. It varies by jurisdiction and type, and even if it's in Fulton or DeKalb, and even if they decide not to honor the freeze, it's still not for sure that a transaction is going to cause the assessment to be immediately increased. There are other factors involved there on whether or not they're going to revalue that property type. And going on and just chasing the sale really is not something that they're supposed to do. And normally if they do and they don't revalue the other properties of that type or in that neighborhood, then they're creating uniformity arguments, which is a valid appeal argument in Georgia. So, yeah. Well, if this property is valued at $200 a square foot and the property next door, the other office building, sells for $300, and the Fulton County says, okay, well, we're going to prop them at $300, and they don't bother me, that's not uniform. They're competing properties that are assessed differently. Yes, sir.
Has your company developed any strategy to address the difference between a income stream of a business that's situated on that property? Is there a way?
But those transaction prices, they are difficult to overcome in appeals. We make that up what the counties currently have them assessed at right now. So if you're going in and buying one and they're jacking you up and they're not raising everybody else's values, that's automatically an appeal argument right there. As far as segregating it out, we've done some research on that. There's been litigation with hotels with that same argument all over the country, and they're kind of falling down on each side. It's really not anything that's set yet. It's really just a negotiation.
Where the governmental bodies are looking for business.
That's correct.
Real estate speak, but the question you're discussing is
Value differs, and believe it or not, we have a different opinion than the assessing authorities do.
insured employment, right? One last question, up here in front.
A little bit slanted when it transacted, it's totally different. Generally, by property type, though, I would agree that some properties are overvalued, some aren't. And it's just based on, they have limited resources, especially in Fulton County. So they can't go in and look at every property value every year. They're also picking, these articles pick 299, and in the grand scheme of things, those properties are getting favorable treatment compared to the properties that are getting revalued more often. And those are typically the ones that you see a lot more transactions on, multifamily, the trophy office, that kind of thing.
Okay. Paul, could you stay for a short while afterwards in case anybody else has a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, we're right right at 1 o'clock, and we're going to end here, and then I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. Very quick, about a month ago, we sent out a survey to our members with a $100. Pull the name out of this. There's still names in there, so everybody, you want to veracity of the.